John 14. Let not your hearts be troubled. Ye believe in God, believe also in me. In my Father's house are many mansions. If it were not so, I would have told you. I go to prepare a place for you. And if I go and prepare a place for you, I will come again and receive you unto myself, that where I am, there ye may be also. And whither I go, ye know, and the way ye know.
It's about time, man, because I'm ready to go home. I'm ready to get the kingdom. I'm ready to live. I'm ready to breathe fresh. I'm ready to have beautiful women, okay? Not no strawberry harlots on this side. I'm ready to have children, man, you can vibe with, okay? Be around brothers. Be around the Lord himself, okay? I'm ready to go and visit places in the galaxy that we didn't know exist. All right? I'm ready to walk on sandy beaches, man, and explore the ocean floors. I'm ready to fly, okay? I'm ready to eat real food. Okay, I'm ready to drive a chariot, man. All right, I'm ready to minister to the Lord and to be ministered to, man. Okay, I'm ready to worship Yahweh in its full entirety. Okay, I'm ready for it. We're ready, man. I'm ready to see angels and greet angels.
But as it is written, eye hath not seen, nor ear heard, neither have entered into the heart of man the things which God hath prepared for them that love him. But God hath revealed them unto us by his Spirit. But as it is written, eye hath not seen, nor ear heard, neither have entered into the heart of man the things which God hath prepared for them that love him. But God hath revealed them unto us by his Spirit.
All right, Shalom. First and foremost, I would like to give all praise and glory unto Yahweh Bahashem, Yahweh Shah Bahashem, Rakakwadash, and double honors unto the apostles and the elders of GMS who rule well, teach well, being great examples towards younger brothers, and peace and blessings and salutation to the hopeful elect out there pushing his word and truth and their sincerity across the four winds in the name of Yahweh Bahashem, Yahweh Shah Bahashem, Rakakwadash, pushing to get up out of here. Shalom to the hopeful elect, the believers, the listeners who have came back to the obedience of the scriptures through faith in Yahweh Bashem Yahweh Shai. All right, and what I want to go into with this lesson, is dealing with unbelief, because we have to understand that only there's an elect, okay, that will have faith in these last days. There's a remnant, an elect of Israel, all right, the tribes, okay, that was meant to have faith in these last days. 2/3 of our people, they're going to walk in unbelief to their destruction, and that's something that we have to understand. And then, it should make us more appreciative, of, all right, faith, man. The ability to understand, the ability to believe, the ability to be comforted by this word. That's a rare thing in the earth, and the Lord is allowing us to do this daily, He's allowing us to be edified daily, to be comforted by this word daily, to increase in understanding daily, faith boosters, daily, man. We should be appreciative, man, okay, because there's a majority of our people, as we're predestined, Lord will their number, we endure, but there's right now, we're predestined to believe. There's a remnant that's predestined to believe, and there's a remnant there's a portion of our people, okay, that's predestined not to believe, man. You see, And that's the difference between the chariots is going to be faith. Okay. Now, what I want to get into is these two accounts, and then we'll build from there. This is the book of Mark, chapter 5, verse 36. It says, as soon as Yahushua heard the word that was spoken, he said unto the ruler of the synagogue, well, matter of fact, let me start up. This is Mark 5 and 35. It says, while he yet spake, there came from the ruler of the synagogue's house certain which said, thy daughter is dead, why troubles thy master any further? So you had this Jake Jerry, okay, who had a daughter that was sick, and as the house on the way to heal her, she died. Okay, so there's a message came from the house of Jerry, said, look, don't even bother yourself anymore. She gone, you know. And Yahushua heard that. Verse 36, as soon as Yahushua heard the word that was spoken, he said unto the ruler of the synagogue, be not afraid, only believe. And that made me think that we're going to come into some times, that we're going to think, it's beyond repair. You see, but we have to really lean on he is, and he's giving all power to Yahushua. So no matter what circumstance that we come into is light work to the Most High. I'm speaking to myself first, and that's a mindset to have going into these times. Like no matter what the situation might look like, it's always light work to Yahweh Bashim Al-Shah. Whether she was sick or whether she was dead, it's all the same thing because he is, and Yahweh Shah has been given all power. So we good, because in the times we coming into, it's going to be some hell of a times and hell of a situations we're going to be in as believers, man. And that's when the Lord get to show that he is. Okay. Verse 37 says, and he suffered no man to follow him save Peter, James, and John, the brother of James. And he come into the house of the ruler of the synagogue and seeth the tumult and them that wept and wailed greatly. And when he was come in, he saith unto them, why make ye this ado and weep? Well, why y'all making this big fuss? The damsel is not dead, but sleeping. So he comes into the room, and people, are grieving as if it's over. Okay? But not recognizing that, look, who just stepped in. So Yahushua said, why make you all this fuss? The damsel is not dead, but sleeping. And they laughed him to scorn. But when he had put them all out, he taketh the father and mother of the damsel and them that were with him and entered in where the damsel was lying. Yeah, so those that laughed him to scorn, he made them get out. Okay? He had to remove what? Unbelief. You see? And in our day-to-day, the Lord is constantly removing unbelief, man. We're being built up to be unmovable. Avaratazah, man. Lord willing, man, we're being built up to be unmovable, man. You see? So he had to remove unbelief out the atmosphere, man. And so the Lord does that with us daily. He's moving that unbelief, man. Okay? And it says, and he took and is setting the tone, setting the atmosphere for him to do miracles, man. Okay? It says, and he took the damsel by the hand and said unto her, Talitha Kumi, which is being interpreted, damsel, I say unto thee, rise. And straightway the damsel arose and walked, for she was of the age of 12 years, spirit, 12 tribes, being awakened, and it says, and they were astonished with a great astonishment. Okay. Now you go here to the next chapter. Okay. It shows you how Yahushua, hates the atmosphere of unbelief. When you go to Mark 6:1, it says, and he went out from thence and came into his own country, and his disciples, all right, his disciples followed him. And when the Sabbath day was come, he began to teach in the synagogue, and many hearing him were astonished, saying, from whence hath this man these things? And what wisdom is this which is given unto him, that even such mighty works are wrought by his hands? So they're hearing the teaching, they hearing about the miracle, they've heard about the miracles, they're seeing, the power in his teaching. Okay, and what immediately did they go to do? They start trying to minimize it. Okay, trying to explain it away. You see, Mark 6:3, he said, "Is not the carpenter the son of Mary, the brother of James and Joseph and Judah and Simon? Are not his sisters here with us?" Or it says, and they were offended at him. See, they was offended. Here it is, they offended at the power. You see why? Because of unbelief. Okay, and Jake was familiar with Yahweh Shaka. This was Nazareth, his hometown. Okay, so Jake was offended, like, who is this? We know him. You see, ain't no way. Like, why is he able to do this? This is Joseph's son, this Mary boy. We know his sister and them, mama and them. You know, Jake B. You see, so they was offended at Yahweh Shai. Instead of believing, they was offended, and that's why 2/3 they're offended to this day. You know, because they wasn't predestined to believe. That's why they're offended at this word. That's why they don't mind. All right, doing a 18-part series of why they left the Hebrew Israelites, or just becoming a professional scoffer, a full-time scoffer of the truth, because they're offended. You see, they're offended at this word. Okay, and it says, "But Yahushua said unto them, a prophet is not without honor, but in his own country and among his own kin and among his own house." Yeah, because no matter how much the Lord is dealing, the people we grew up with, all they're gonna see is a person they knew. Okay, they're not gonna see us as a prophet of Yahweh Bashim Al Shai. Okay, Jake too familiar. You see, and for us to make a jump from regular men to being prophets, okay, Jake can't fathom that. You see, and it says, and he could there. It says, and this the point. It says, and he could there do no mighty work, save that he laid his hands on a few sick folk and healed them. And he marveled because of their unbelief, and he went round about the villages teaching. Yes, so he didn't even do a lot of mighty works there, man, because the atmosphere was full of unbelief, man. It was full of unbelief, so he didn't even do many things there. Okay, and what we're learning is faith is what activates the power. Believing in Yahweh B'Shem Al Shai, when we pray, it's the faith that activates the prayer that He can do it. Whatever we're doing, everything we're doing, our obedience is through faith. Everything we do is based on faith, man. The labor, you labor and toil, all of it is based on faith. We're faith-based. You see, and that sets the atmosphere for the Lord to show power. He's going to show power to those that believe before the power is shown. You go into all the people that was healed, they believed before they was healed. They believed before the power was shown. So we got to believe before the Lord, show another level of power coming into these times. Now, let's go from there and see, unbelief ain't nothing new. Our people been impatient. Okay, been unappreciative. These things are nothing new. But faith ain't just a New Testament concept. All right, you go back here. This is Exodus 32:1. It says, and when the people saw that Moses delayed to come down out of the mount, the people gathered themselves together unto Aaron and said unto him, Up, make us gods, which shall go before us. For as for this Moses, the man that brought us up out of the land of Egypt, we know not what is become of him, because Moses was in the mount getting the law. Here it is, a chariot, okay, following Jake. Okay, a cloud in the day. Okay, and a pillar of fire at night. You see, so Jake is being shielded from the sun in the desert. Okay, and then Jacob's having the light to guide them, and that same chariot aided in delivering them out of Egypt. Okay, they just seen all the miracles of the Most High. They just got delivered from the superpower of the earth. Okay, the Egyptians. And Moses going up to the mount to get the law, and they're seeing, is going down on top of the mount. The presence of the Lord is at the top of the mount. But Jake still didn't believe, man. And it shows you there's nothing that can be done to convince 2/3 to believe. That's why we don't put emphasis on those that don't believe. Our emphasis on the believers, man. Okay, and the Lord has shown us that there's nothing that can be done to get 2/3 to believe, man. They always gonna have a gripe. It's always gonna be some doubt. It's always gonna be complaining. Okay, because of unbelief. Verse 2, it says, and Aaron said unto them, break off the golden earrings which are in the ears of your wives, of your sons, and of your daughters, and bring them unto me. And all the people break off the golden earrings which were in the ears, and brought them unto Aaron. And he received them at their hand, and fashioned it with a graven tool. And after he made it a molten calf, and they said, these be thy gods, O Israel, which brought thee out of the land of Egypt. So Jake couldn't even wait a few weeks. Jake didn't have the faith. Jake didn't have the patience to wait a few weeks. And what did they do? They went and served other gods. Just like now, in Jacob's trouble in the time of tribulation, man, 2/3 are not going to have the patience to wait on the Lord. They're going to go get their seed. They're going to go to their idol. Okay, they're going to go down to Egypt again. You see, because this golden calf comes from, all right, the worship of in Egyptian gods, man. Here it is, their power just saved them from Egypt, and Jake went back to worship Egyptian gods in a matter of weeks, man, of Moses being on the mount. Maybe 40 days before he came down and seen Jake was down there tripping. All right, and it's based on what? Unbelief, man. All right, because they didn't believe, so they was easily swayed. And these are times, we're coming into where our people that don't believe, they're going to be easily swayed. Okay, so when you go, let's go. Let's go Deuteronomy. Real quick. It's the book of Deuteronomy, chapter 30. Because the concept of unbelief, is not it's not a new concept. Yes. So let's go Deuteronomy 32:10. All right, this is another account, of the unbelief, of Jake, man. You see, where they would desert their own power, as a people. And that's what got us punished. Well, main thing that got us punished, man, is these other gods, man. Which shows a complete lack of belief, man. Deuteronomy 32:10 says he found him in a desert land and in the waste, howling wilderness. He led him about, he instructed him, he kept him as the apple of his eye. And this is the Lord, speaking about Israel. Okay. As an eagle stirred up her nest, fluttered over her young, spread abroad her wings, taketh them, beareth them on her wings. And that was the chariot, guiding us out of Egypt. It's like he just as a hen, or any mother birds are extremely protective, over a young. That's how the Heavenly Father was over Israel, man. He was extremely protective. Okay? Remember, our people didn't have to fight a war to leave Egypt. The Lord fought for us, man, and protected us, all right, coming out of Egypt, man. Okay? It says, so the Lord alone did lead them, and there was no strange God with them. He made him, all right, he made him ride on the high places of the earth that he might eat the increase of the fields. He made him to suck honey out of the rock and oil out of the flinty rocks, butter of kine and milk of sheep, with fat of lambs and the rams of the bread of Bashan, the goats with the fat of kidneys of wheat, and thou didst drink the pure blood of the grape or the best wine. So this is the Lord saying how he's whining and dining Israel. The Lord's like, look, you're getting the best of the best. You're getting the best livestock, the best wine, all right, the best delicacies. You're protected like no other nation. You see? It says, but Jeshurun, which is another name for Israel, all right, Yashawan, which means upright one in the Hebrew. But Jeshurun waxed fat and kicked. Thou art waxing fat, thou art grown thick, thou art covered with fatness. Then he forsook the Most High, which made him, and lightly esteemed the rock of his salvation. Okay, so it also lets you know that finances ain't, can Jake, talk about finances, and, as if, of course, you need money to survive. But see, Jake, think that if we thrive in finances, that's going to make a difference in our people. It's not. Okay? Because we done had sovereignty before. We done been financially well off and still went left, man. Okay? The Northern Kingdom went right into idolatry right after King Solomon, man. Okay? And that was the richest we ever been as a nation, man. You see, but that generation of unbelief always, hit the scene, man. They do best and not believe. Lord will, we are not of, their cloth, man. Lord will, we are of the believers. You see? So when you keep reading, it says, they provoked him to jealousy with strange gods, with abominations provoked they him to anger. They sacrificed unto devils, not to the Most High, to gods whom they knew not, to new gods that came newly up, whom your fathers feared not. And you look at today, our people's faith, is in what? Money, Esau, technology, social media, clout, being popular, self-worship. These are things our people are into today because of no belief, unbelief, man. Okay, so of the rock that begot thee, thou art unmindful, and has forgotten, all right, the Most High that formed thee. And when the Lord Yahweh Bashim Shai saw it, he abhorred them, which avoided them, because of the provoking of his sons and of his daughters. And he said, I will hide my face from them. I will see what their end shall be, for they are a very forward generation, children in whom is no faith. Children in whom is no faith. Okay? So unbelief and unfaithfulness is a concept that starts in the Old Testament, man. You see, that we're seeing it playing out to this very day, because the Lord sent us in captivity. We were scattered. This was all rooted in unbelief, that we was punished like we was punished. Just because we didn't believe our power. Because if we believe, there will be no way we will be obedient if we really believe our power. If we appreciate our power, there wouldn't be no disobedience, man. Okay, but we had to go through that as a people. Okay, and even in the situation we in now, it work in favor for the believers. See, everything working in favor, to those predestined to believe, everything works in our favor. You see? Because even in these worst, these circumstances we've been in for these last, few centuries as a people, man. Okay. Well, it produced, all right, a remnant. You see, there will be awakened and appreciate righteousness, man. Okay. That's why you go here. It's Romans 8:28. It says, and we know that all things work together for good to them that love the Most High, to them who are called according to His purpose, man. You see, and then we're called, okay, to be of that remnant where that was set up before the foundation of the world. And even these captivities played a part in pushing us, to believe, to have authentic faith in our power in these last days. Okay. But the 2/3 of our people that refuse to believe, okay, the Lord is going to abhor them, which is avoid them in these times, man. They're just going to be out here for the taking, man. Okay. So let's go from there. Let's get this real quick and let's get this in second Esdras chapter. Let's get second Esdras 15. So this second Esdras 15:1. All right, and this is a command from the Lord. It says, but speak thou in the ears of my people the words of prophecy, which I will put in thy mouth, saith the Lord. So in these latter days, the Lord, has raised up, prophets, man. The prophets are back, with a word from Yahweh by Shema Shai, and it's his word. You see? And he's given, the talents, the spirit, for his men to break this word down and to teach. Okay, it says, and call them to be written in paper, for they are faithful and true, which is the Bible. It says, fear not the imaginations against thee, let not the incredulity of them trouble thee that speak against thee. And incredulity, is the lack of faith, okay, or the ability, the ability, lacking the ability to believe. When you go into this word incredulity, it goes into lacking the ability, okay, to believe. Because it ain't them. So you got to be, faith has to be, faith is a gift from the Most High. And it says how it's with the faithful from the womb. The fear of the Lord is with the elect from the womb. It just has to be activated by His word. See, this word activates the faith that's already in the elect. You see, it's just take the true doctrine, His word, all right, which is how Yahweh Shai speaks to the church through the prophets. It takes Yahweh Shai speaking through the prophets, unlocking their word, unlocking their faith and their fear. You see? It said, let not the incredulity of them trouble thee that speak against thee, for all the unfaithful shall die in their unfaithfulness, man. So we know that's a part of it. That's why, we're not puzzled. Okay, we don't get anxiety when our people don't believe. And it's because you can look at it like, damn, how they don't believe, like, but then you look at the history of Jake. There's nothing that can be done to fix Jake's unbelief. Okay, they was here, they're here now to die in their unfaithfulness. You see, they're gonna die with that unbelief. You see, and the Lord set it up like that. So let's go from there. A couple more. Let's get this. Let's go to the book of Hebrews. All right, chapter 4. All right, this is the book of Hebrews, chapter 4, verse 1. It said, let us therefore fear, least a promise being left us of entering into his rest. Any of you should seem to come short of it. For unto us was the gospel preached, as well as unto them. But the word preached did not profit them, not being mixed with faith in them that heard it. Okay? So our people that hear this word, but faith is not mixed. And if it's not mixed with faith, you see, then it's pointless, man. You see, and hearing this word is pointless if it's not mixed with faith. And that's the difference between the 1/3 and the 2/3, because we all, have been exposed to the same word, the same teaching. Okay. It was just when the 1/3, all right, when the hopeful elect hear the word is mixed with faith. And that's what changes everything. That's what brings us back to life, bring us back to our purpose. That's what brings us back, to rehearsing the righteous acts, to committing to this thing, man. Following the Lamb, Yahweh in the spirit in these days, man. Okay. We have our eyes on the world to come. You see, our focus is on a world of age beyond this one. Okay. That's coming with Yahweh, because we heard this word and it was mixed with faith, and that's the difference. You see? So when you go here, this is on Hebrews 11 and 6. And it said, but without faith, it is impossible to please him. So without faith, it's impossible to please him. You really got to sit on that, man. It's impossible. They said without faith, it's impossible, man. Okay? Jake put this emphasis on the law because Jake don't got faith. You see? And Jake think they have some type of ability within themselves to do a checklist, and nah, man, it's going to take faith, man, because see, faith, all right, ain't something that can be, displayed at will. You see, with the law, you can go all out and make it seem like you're on point with the law. Okay. But with faith, it's something that's going to be showed in situations. Okay. It's going to be shown in the clutch. And that's why Jacob trouble, you see, you ain't going to no one's going to be able to fake it through the tribulation. Because it's going to have to be faith shown. It's going to have to be decisions made in faith. Okay. We're going to have to make decisions based in faith to Yahweh Shema Shai. And there ain't going to be no other option. Okay. And without their faith, it's impossible to please him. For he that cometh to the Most High must believe that he is, and that he is reward of them that diligently seek them. Yeah, we must believe that he is. Going back to earlier, man, knowing that he is, man, we go into every situation with confidence. Knowing that he is, we go into every situation with confidence, man. Especially we doing it for his sake, for his name, for righteousness' sake, man. We go into it with confidence. Well, he is. It's in his hands. However it play out, he got it figured out. That unmovable faith, man. So the Lord is building up, all right, the remnant to have this unmovable faith, in these times. And Lord will, we prevail. Lord will, we're part of that number, man. We keep the faith, until the end. You see? So that's the point. Just wanted to touch on that. So Lord will, you brothers, all right, and you few sisters edified once again. I want to give all praise and glory unto Yahweh, Bahashem, Yahweh Shai, Bahashem, and Kakwadash, and double honors unto the apostles and the elders of GMS who rule well, teach well, being great examples towards younger brothers, and peace and blessings and salutations to the hopeful elect. Shalom.